Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jennifer Adams, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief with Signature Leadership by Knowledge Hook. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. I know we're going to have a great session. Our topic today is the OECD Survey of Social and Emotional Skills. And this is a first session of a three-part series where we are going to go a little bit deeper into the findings with two of the participating countries. So really fortunate to be doing that. The topic that we're going to delve into today is the findings on inclusion. So looking forward to this conversation. We have, this series is a partnership with three partners. The first partner is Knowledge Hook, and many of you will have taken part in previous sessions, and Knowledge Hook does roundtables every second week and a whole series of podcasts. And so you're welcome to jump into that. It is free and available for any leaders in schools or districts or ministries and countries. Feel free to jump in and access the resources that are there. Our second partner is Karanga, and that is the Global Alliance for Social and Emotional Learning and Life Skills. And all of us, the four of us here today, are all members of either the executive or the steering committees. And we're really trying to make sure that we have an opportunity to advocate for social and emotional learning in our schools and our school systems, and really taking a particular look on what's happening globally and learning from each other. So welcome to join karanga.org and take a look at the work that they're doing. And our final partner is Salzburg Global Seminar, an incredible not-for-profit that emerged just after the Second World War. And they are doing all sorts of interesting things to really challenge current and future leaders on really important subject areas. So they do great work, and we've got fellows from 180 countries, and you're certainly welcome to take a peek at the work that they're doing as well. We have participants from 7 Canadian provinces and territories, from 17 states across the US, and from 24 countries. And we're thrilled to have all of you here. And please jump into the chat, say hello and where you're coming from, and please engage with our panelists. We love to have questions and comments. I'm going to hand it over to Dominic, who is my very good friend and partner, and he is going to introduce a little bit more on the topic and our wonderful panelists, Pedro and Marjo. So welcome, everybody. Jump into the chat.
Thank you, Jen. Let me add my welcome to you all. It's fantastic to be with you for the February edition of the SEL Global Leadership Series. As Jen said, this is the beginning of a mini series that will be running over the next few months, where we have the opportunity of speaking with different cities and countries that were involved in the OECD study and looking at the implications of the study and findings through different lenses. So today we're going to focus on Portugal and Finland, specifically Sintra and Helsinki's experiences, and think about inclusion and what the report tells us for inclusion. As Jen said, it's brilliant that we're doing this with two very close collaborators within Karanga. So Pedro Cunha, who's a program director at the Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation and has been part of Karanga since its inception back in the autumn of 2019. And Marjo Kyllönen, who is the head of education development services in Helsinki Education Division and has been with Karanga for about 18 months now. So it's fantastic to be talking with two friends in today's conversation. As Jen said, for everyone who is joining us, then please introduce yourselves in the chat. Many of you have already started doing that. If you have useful SEL resources, or you're reminded of things that you've read, or TED Talks, or podcasts, or videos that you've seen that are relevant to the discussion, then please do share them. It's a fantastic opportunity to use the collective intelligence of everyone together today to share resources and develop our collective understanding around this topic. The format for today is I'm going to speak for about 5 minutes about the context for the OECD study and share a couple of highlights from it. I'll then hand over to Marjo, who's going to talk in more detail about the implications for Helsinki and the Helsinki City Report, and specifically focusing on inclusion. Feel free, and please would actively encourage you to post questions for Marjo while she's talking. And then Pedro and I we'll have a bit of a conversation and we'll bring in as many of your questions and comments as possible. And then we'll shift the lens to Sintra and to Portugal, and Pedro will share some findings from the Sintra report, and we'll do the same thing. And then we'll put it all together in the final section with a more general conversation. So the OECD study came out last September. It's an absolutely fantastic resource. It goes into an amazing amount of depth and detail with findings from across 9 cities. I can't recommend it highly enough. There's years and years worth of insight and findings in there. There are some fantastic introductory talks given by Andrea Schleicher and a number of the other people connected with the study, which are widely available on YouTube and worth looking at to get a general sense of the overview of the whole piece. These are the 9 cities that were involved. So from 8 different countries, 2 Colombian cities, and then China, South Korea, Turkey, Portugal, Finland, Canada, the US. So, the findings, where there are consistent findings across all 9 cities, then, it's reasonable to assume that we're getting close to findings that will be relevant in many, many more jurisdictions and contexts than just these 9 cities, which is why it's such one of the reasons why it's such an interesting piece of research. The OECD are at the moment in the process of identifying cities that will be part of the second phase of the study, and there are details on the OECD website if you would be interested in learning more about that, or if you think that the city that you're based in might be interested in being part of that study. So the report itself is organized into 5 chapters. There is a section that dives down into the socio-demographic distribution of social and emotional skills, and what the study says about that. There is then a section which focuses on academic success and education and career aspirations. One of the highlights, and something which won't come as an enormous surprise, I imagine, to a fair few people on this call, is that there is a very close correlation between social emotional skills and academic outcomes. The third chapter is focused on students' well-being, and particularly psychological well-being. And again, there is a very close correlation between social and emotional skills and how students feel about themselves. And there's particularly pertinent findings around stress resistance, optimism, and emotional control. The 4th chapter is focused on creativity and curiosity, and some really interesting findings here about the correlation between self-reported social and emotional skills and then students' creativity and curiosity. And if you have the more opportunities there are for developing creativity and curiosity, the more they reinforce social and emotional skills. And then we already know from an earlier chapter in the report that social and emotional skills are a very good indicator of later academic success and other important school outcomes. So there's a sort of through line running through many different aspects of this. And the 5th chapter in the report is around social interactions or social relations. And I suspect that where a lot of our conversation today is going to be grounded, although we will range across other findings in the report, because there's that relationship between inclusion and belonging and what this means for students' success in school and later life. I'm going to share a link for the report in the chat momentarily, and so that you can find it there. There's lots of other supporting materials on the OECD website too. But what we're going to do now, as I said, is hand over to Marjo, who's going to take us through some of the findings from Helsinki, and then Pedro and I will have a conversation with her about her presentation, and we'll bring in as many of your comments and questions as possible. So please don't be silent or quiet in the chat. Marjo, let me hand over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Dominic. It's really my great pleasure to be with you and to share with you and discuss about the findings, and specifically on inclusion, on a perspective of inclusion, as this is a very, very important, inclusive approach is a very core value in a Finnish education system as well in city of Helsinki. And this research was a great opportunity for us to get international reflections where we are at the moment and what are the critical areas of development. And we knew already that social and emotional skills play a crucial role in learning process, and also how crucial they are to become a full active member in society. But we didn't have data, research-based data. And without data, our opinion is just one opinion amongst the others. So as said here, social and emotional skills matter for academic success. And in Helsinki, intellectual curiosity, persistence, assertiveness, and trust are the skills most strongly related to 15-year-olds' school performance in reading, mathematics, and arts. And interestingly, students who participated in after-school art activities reported higher level of creativity. And creativity is associated with expectations of working in the creative occupation. And our students expecting a creative occupation tend to be more optimistic. And as we can see here, in Helsinki, optimism was strongly related to life satisfaction, and life satisfaction is and energy is related to the current psychological well-being. And well-being is, to our understanding, prerequisite for well-learning. Actually, there's no well-learning without well-being. So social and emotional skills matter for well-being and well-learning. Gender differences in students' social and emotional skills are slightly more pronounced in Helsinki than on average across the participating cities. And the gap in life satisfaction was the largest. Boys indicated higher life satisfaction than girls, and that was quite an alarming result to us. And as we are reflecting these results to other researches or surveys, like our National Social Health Promotion study indicated the similar progress in gender differences. And students' background matters as well. Students with higher socioeconomic status tend to report higher skills. This was not a surprising, but it made us to think how to bridge the gap, how to support children and young ones coming from lower social economic background to improve their social and emotional skills. Because here is the kind of the clue. Social emotional skills are strongly connected to the academic achievements of our students, as said. And we know based on previous studies that students' social economic background is strongly connected also to the learning results. So probably focusing on social emotional skills development could be a key asset to prevent polarization. There were also, I forgot, there was also exceptions in Helsinki. For example, the students coming from the lower socioeconomic background showed stronger stress resistance, might be partly because they have met challenges more than their mates. But interestingly, students with an immigrant background, they showed higher life satisfaction, and they also exhibited higher levels of skills of persistence, self-control, stress, energy, self-efficiency. The good news here are that students' social and emotional skills are malleable, and students' social and emotional skills can be influenced by the school environment. And actually, school culture and atmosphere are crucial. Students' sense of belonging is a predictive of higher skills. And that's why we need to focus on students-teachers relationship. How do teachers meet and communicate with the students? And also focus on anti-bullying strategies and also student agency. And this is actually where our focus is now. We are in the process of developing practical tools and programs to develop these areas, and actually already have some in practice. What are the other next step that we are going to make based on this study. Actually, we are in the process in our city make a strategy for education 2030 in Helsinki, and the findings, conclusions, and actions to be taken based on this survey will be part of that strategy. We want to create deeper understanding on this study and other studies related to this. Construct a vision for future learning and leadership, practical steps, what to do at the school level and how to lead it. One tool to bridge the learning gap is to promote pupils' agency, well-being and well-learning for all. And what is also needed, what we need to do, is to develop practical tools and methods with our teachers how to promote social and emotional learning and skills. We will continue our collaboration with this university, Helsinki University, and participate the second round of OECD study to get better understanding of the phenomenon. Thank you. More information from the OECD website.
Thank you, Marjo. That was brilliant overview. I would love to ask questions, Pedro. I'm sure you will have questions, so please feel free to jump in as well. And, you know, audience, if you have questions for Marjo, then feel free to add them in the chat. But I wonder if we could start with a sort of obvious question, Marjo, about what was there that was surprising for you from the findings, or did they reinforce things that you already knew to be true for Helsinki schools?
Actually, they reinforce the understanding of the importance of social emotional skills. And in a way, as I said, it was not a surprising result that the students coming from the higher socioeconomic background were in general kind of exhibited higher skills. But the gender gap was really something that made us to think. We are used to think that the gender gap and the learning gaps and all the gaps are very small in Finland, and to be one of the kind of on the top of in gender gaps, for example, in this life satisfaction, it was really alarming. And taking into consideration that this survey was done before COVID, and we have similar indicators, not only this health survey, but also from other surveys, that this kind of life satisfaction and well-being in general, it has really decreased. And now we are looking also at the gaps. What happens to our girls? Why they are so stressed?
And are there policies, or is it too soon to be thinking about kind of policy shifts or interventions that you can be making across the school system to help?
Actually, yes, because the report came, as you said, last fall, and we got our report in October. So we got a new mayor and deputy mayors and new city parliament just in the beginning of August. So this was kind of a very good time to get these results, as our politicians, they are very interested in what are the results and how do we promote, for example, this kind of social emotional skills, the interaction in between pupils and in between teachers and pupils. And I mentioned this strategy 2030. So actually that's will be the main policy paper for us. We are just in the process of building it. And these skills are definitely, these findings and conclusions will definitely have an impact what we will write there. Also, we have already started to kind of scale what we have and what is missing. What tools do we have, what is missing?
So, I mean, Helsinki, Finland, is obviously world famous for the kind of astonishing success that the school system has had in PISA tables. And do you think will the findings from the SEL study inform pedagogical approaches across the curriculum in other areas, you think, or again, is it too soon to be drawing those kinds of conclusions?
Probably it's a bit too soon to predict the kind of whole impact of this study, and of course we are looking forward to the second round, but we are quite in a good position because being a city, because this was a city survey, but we have very strong connections to the University of Helsinki, and actually one of the academic professors, Katarina Salmela-Aro, was participating the survey from its very beginning when it was in the planning phase. So we do cooperate very closely with them. Also, the University of Helsinki has made their own research based on the data, and these articles will be published and have already been published and will be published. So the impact will be in long run, it would be quite huge. But I think the best thing here was that in Finland we have this kind of understanding, but no data to support these things. So it's also very important when we are discussing with our teachers union. So we have research-based data telling that these skills are crucial. And this is something, for example, when we are thinking of future skills, what are the competencies needed in 2030? So this type of, we have put the well-being in heart of well-learning, and also the social emotional skills when we are looking at the learner of 2030. So we have described it in the way that it's the well-being of the learner that is in the center, and social emotional skills are the skills that are supporting or promoting well-being of our learners, and through well-being it's also promoting the well-learning.
Yeah, there are some general questions about the report that we could maybe tackle quite quickly. So the students who took part in the survey they were either 10 years old or 15 years old, weren't they, at the time of the surveying?
Actually, yes, and one finding, because I had to make kind of selection what to put in my short presentation and what we didn't. So one results, because we have the 10 years cohort and the 15 years cohort. So what was also a bit, not a bit, but what was alarming and what made us to think that what happens at school is that in majority of the social emotional skills, so they were declining from 10 to 15. So something is in our schools that is not in its place, or of course it can be partly also because of the brainstorm that you are having when you are in their teenage, but that's not the explanation in full. And we have been discussing with our university researchers that what should be done and how to, and specifically today when we're thinking the experience that our young ones have had during the pandemic. So we are discussing and focusing a lot on this kind of trust and hope for future, and how to encourage this type of thinking, and how to, specifically our focus is in our older year cohort of course what happens from 10 to 15, but also to look at that phenomena, that why is their well-being so kind of in a way damaged, but that's a kind of finding that we don't have the explanation yet, but we are looking at very closely what happens in our schools and together with the researchers.
A few questions about the pandemic. So the data collection had completed, hadn't it, before school closures and everything kicked in 2020. So the data is pre-pandemic, but the analysis took place. Some of the analysis took place.
Actually, it was collected 2018, and then 19. Yeah, but it was before the pandemic. So that's one reason we are so interested in participating the second round, because now that will be in mid of pandemic, hopefully, because it will be run in 2023. So hopefully after the pandemic. So we have had, of course, several surveys, and we know that, as I said, that the well-being of our young ones has been threatened, and also there are some signals that are quite alarming. And when you know the connections with the learning results, so it's really a thing that we are focusing a lot currently, also at national level.
There's an interesting thread beginning in the chat about the possible correlation between social media influence and the difference in the gender reporting for boys and girls between 10 and 15. And there's a lot of number of studies out there which show that the kind of more pernicious or negative impact that social media exposure can have on teenage girls and the correlation with mental health issues in many countries around the world. And whether that was also part of your analysis or understanding in the Helsinki context.
Well, not exactly in the impact or effect of social media and how it's affecting the kind of self-esteem is something that we have been discussing, but it has not been quite that strongly in the center of our discussion. More we have been looking at, and specifically not this 15, but a bit older girls. So they tend to, also the 15 years old, but also the older girls, they tend to feel more stressed and kind of even stressed by the school and school achievements. And today, during the pandemic time, so we have seen that also the depression amongst the so-called well-performing or from the good background families, specifically girls, so they feel more depressed and even have this kind of mental health problems. They have felt loneliness and things like that, but not really based on the social media, though we notice that, but it's more or less this kind of what has happened, that some young ones, they really feel that they have been isolated. They haven't had opportunity to be at school and meet their mates, and that is quite damaging when thinking of a teenager who is building up their self-esteem and self-conception. So the social in-person interaction in between the teenagers is very crucial for their health growth and psychological growth, and that is a phenomenon that we have been discussing a lot during this, or also when thinking of whether to go back to remote learning during the Omicron, when the Omicron broke. So there was discussion that we should put these teenagers back to remote learning, but all this research-based understanding helped us to tell the politicians that do not do that. That's very damaging if our young ones can't be at school in person.
And presumably, given the focus for our conversation today around inclusion in general, that the importance of having students come in to school so that you can build that sense of community. I mean, it's been very challenging for teachers around the world to recreate that kind of environment online. I was interested, Marjo, that one of the next steps that you highlighted, and I think your final slide, was around more attention on agency and student voice, and wondered if you could say a little bit more about that and why you kind of zeroed in on that as a way of addressing some of the things in the study. And then Pedro, if you have questions, please unmute and come in, otherwise we'll move to Sintra momentarily. But Marjo, so why the focus on agency, please?
Yeah, but sorry, my loudspeaker was so low. I thought it was the connection, but it was my loudspeaker. Well, when we have been looking at what are the kind of key tools to prevent polarization and exclusion from the communities and society, so based on our experience and also based on the research, so we know that one of the most effective tools is to promote students' agency and also co-agency, that the students are genuinely heard and they can participate in their community. Their initiatives are taken seriously, and not only taken seriously, but also led to an actions. So we have a very strong policy in the city of Helsinki, agency and participation of the citizens, and specifically focusing on the young ones from the early childhood education. And to our understanding, when thinking of social and emotional inclusion and being part of the community, so you first have to be respected as you are, the roots where you come from, so you can respect yourself, your roots and your heritage, and then to be full member of the group, classroom, society, irrespective of your background, to have a full voice, to feel, to be kind of empowered, to be included and empowered, to feel that we can do things together. We are taken seriously, we are heard, we are met. So that's something that is really, it's really improving and promoting the well-being and inclusion of our children. And that's something that we are focusing on, not only the children, but also the parents and the surrounding society.
Thank you. Pedro.
Hi, Marjo. Thank you very much for your presentation. Hi, everybody. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the gender gap that you mentioned. How did people at schools reacted? And what were the explanations that were advanced in your local context? And also, which kind of measures, concrete measures, are you thinking about or already implementing in order to address that gap?
Well, good and very difficult questions. Well, we have the launching event, so the representative from our teachers union really kind of set a very tough question to Andreas Schleicher about these results, and are really kind of reflecting reality. And yes, actually this is the reality, and we don't know exactly that what causes this type of development. It was kind of a surprise for us, and of course we have some assumptions that probably boys are treated differently. They take it in a more relaxed way. They are not that stressed. The girls are more stressed, and of course it made us to think that what happens to our boys, because based on our previous research, so we know, for example, this is from the academic side that our girls and boys are doing very well, for example, in science, but for some reason our girls do not apply for this kind of technology, faculties of technology or science. It's the boys who go there. So something happens there, and it's, to be honest, it's a bit unclear for us that what happens there, because we think that we are very equal, and equality and equity is something that is kind of flowing in our veins, but it's not. This was a moment to kind of stop and look at the mirror, that here we are not where we thought we were. And I don't have the answer yet, because it's too early even to say, but we need a kind of a profound discussion that how do we treat and meet our children. There are also other things, for example, with the migrant background pupils, that do we treat them differently? Do we not expect, well, if they are not native Finnish speakers, do we not expect them the same results and achievements as we are expecting from the native Finnish speakers? So there are actually currently more questions than answers, but I'm quite positive that when we have opened this kind of scenario, and this, we know that this is the result. This is how because it was the honest answer of our pupils. So now we have to go deeper and kind of find the reasons, the roots, kind of the core reasons for what is it there. And as it's so much about the interaction in between teachers and pupils, so our first focus is of course how to develop this kind of competencies amongst our teachers, so they can better be aware of this phenomena, and on the other hand they can also have tools how to promote this. But very, very tough question, specifically when we are thinking being a country of equality, the highest equality and equity also in between the genders. So that was not a result we expected, but it was there, and we want to face it.
You have the opportunity now to think of an equally tough question for Pedro, because we're going to move the lens, if that's okay, and kind of learn a bit more about Sintra and the findings there, and then have a conversation around the implications for Sintra and for Portugal, and then we'll come back to a kind of more general closing conversation. So Pedro, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. First of all, let me present briefly our organization, the Gulbenkian Foundation. It's a philanthropy, a private philanthropy here in Portugal. And we partnered with the municipality of Sintra and with the Portuguese Ministry of Education in order to participate in this very important study. And the reason why we did that is that we were having a very intense discussion nationally about the importance of SEL, but we didn't have a lot of evidence, and we did not have a lot of tools to actually assess these kinds of skills in a more robust way. Some of you have already asked if this is only about self-report. It is not. It's a triangular approach, which is as good as we can get when it comes to social emotional development and learning. And it gave us a pretty good picture of where we are. And more importantly, the questionnaire does not only assess children, but also assesses the environments where they grow. So it assesses the family, parental styles, parental contexts and climates, and the same with schools. It assesses school climates, participation, after-school activities, ethos, vision, mission, etc. And we can easily correlate both. So we can learn about what are the school factors that are influencing more the development of these kinds of skills, and also the family factors that are also taking a role here. So what have we discovered about Sintra? Well, the first thing we've discovered, and that was today, is that kids in Sintra are not that different from kids in Helsinki, because the main findings are pretty much the same. The first one is that, as Marjo said already, social emotional skills, they do matter, and they are quite malleable. And as in Helsinki, persistence, curiosity, and also trust are the skills that are more positively related with academic performance. And this was a very good thing to learn, because we had a big discussion nationally where you had those people that were defending back to basics, let's focus on literacy and numeracy and things like that. And those people were saying we have to focus on performance. And now what we can say is that if you really want to performance, so please pay attention to social emotional learning. That's the best way for you to get the performance that you think is the most important thing in an education system. The other one is about well-being. We also found a strong correlation between the development of social emotional skills and the levels of well-being of children in both cohorts. And also, as Marjo said, this decline, we found the decline of social emotional competences between the cohort of 10-year-olds and 15-year-olds. And here we have to take a pause to think a little bit about this. We had a big debate in Sintra about this particular topic. There were news in the newspapers about this specific outcome. And in a way, people were surprised and sad, because the first or the rapid conclusion that one might take is, well, we're killing social emotional skills in schools. We are killing creativity in schools. Well, this is not actually fair for schools. It's not that true. First of all, there are cultural factors influencing this. Secondly, as we've seen, there are gender issues influencing this. Thirdly, there are developmental factors influencing this. I can challenge you to think about, for instance, one of the competences that we measured was openness to experience. If you look to our own lives, it is not expected that an 80-year-old person is more open to novelty and experiences than a 40-year-old or a 20-year-old. So not all competences developed linearly or positively. It's like this. And it's a big challenge to communicate development psychology to a wider audience. For the wider audience, this was a big surprise. But for people that study this for decades and decades, it's not that a big surprise. It doesn't mean that we don't have to think about it. Of course we do. But development is not linear, that's for sure, in human beings, that's for sure. And also there's a question of self-awareness. The awareness that a 15-year-old has is not the same than a 10-year-old or a 5-year-old. So we had a big discussion about this particular one. And of course, there's not a clear answer for this. But one thing we know is that it is not necessarily school's fault. Let's resume like this. It doesn't mean that we don't have to rethink school and education, but not to blame schools about this one. The second one was about gender, as we've already discussed. Also here, boys report higher levels of social and emotional skills, and also higher levels of academic expectations. And again, this has to be, this is linked with self-awareness and realism, about being realistic, because girls are the ones who have best results in school education, in all the sectors in Portugal, basic, secondary, and university. So, but again, there's a cultural thing here that we have to think about very carefully. Another one is that older girls report lower levels of school belonging. So the levels of school belonging decrease with age, particularly in girls, which is, again, a warning sign that we have to take care. And then boys report higher levels of exposure to bullying, as described by the OECD in this particular study, because this bullying, it does not necessarily mean the bullying that is measured by many other scales. The third one, which is not a novelty, is socioeconomic is still playing its role when it comes to academic expectations and levels of social emotional skills. And again, girls and kids with lower socioeconomic status and migrants are reporting lower psychological well-being levels. And again, we know that higher socioeconomic status is related with better student-teacher relations. When it comes to school climate, we learned that student-teacher relations are quite linked with school economic, the social emotional skills. And then that emotional regulation and engagement with others, these are two of the group of competencies, or two of the clusters, are the ones that are more correlated with the sense of school belonging, which we know is linked with social emotional learning, which we know is linked with well-being and school performance. And then also students with a greater sense of school belonging and better relations with teachers, they report higher social economical skills, as I just mentioned. So the question is, what now? What do we do? So we just finished around a tourney discussing these results with each one of the schools in the Sintra municipality. This was a partnership, again, between the municipality, the Gulbenkian Foundation, and the Ministry of Education. And each one of these schools in the municipality is developing an action plan in order to tackle the findings that were more relevant to their specific school. So we asked for a team of researchers to disaggregate these big results in smaller results per school. And then we had a discussion with each school. and each school is designing internally an action plan for the next school year to tackle either the gender issues, either the socioeconomic status issues, either the age drop. So they selected issues that they want to solve. And as a consequence of this, the city municipality is thinking on incentives for schools to come up with and to implement plans in order to promote well-being, inclusion, and social-emotional learning. And also the government approved a national census on student and teacher well-being. It's the first time it's done. It's like the sequence of the SES study, but instead of doing it internationally with the OECD, the government decided to do an in-depth study with a national sample, a representative sample of teachers. So we're assessing both teachers and students on their well-being and working conditions and learning conditions of both. And the idea is that this study will be done regularly, and to set up an observatory of student and teacher well-being in Portugal. And this is one of the consequences of this particular study. And also the Gulbenkian Foundation agreed with the Ministry of Education to launch a series of trainings, professional development courses, either to teachers and non-teaching staffs in schools, that are basically concentrated in two levels. One level is to help teachers and non-teaching staff to develop their own emotional literacy, to learn about themselves and their own emotional management and regulation. This is part one. Part two is about strategies to develop these skills in classrooms, but also outside classrooms and also outside schools with families and community organizations. This is the second part of the training. We are currently preparing this training to be delivered this school year. And then the Gulbenkian Foundation since 2018 is funding 100 different interventions in all the country on SEL. So these are 100 different answers to a very simple question. And the simple question is, how can we help our schools and our families and our communities to create environments where children grow happy and healthy and striving? And these 100 interventions, some of them have been tested using the SES tool, assessment tool. This is a very important output of this study, is that the assessment tool is public today. It's translated, adapted, validated in Portugal, and schools are already using it to assess their own practices. So when they implement certain strategy, they have the opportunity to use this online simple tool, 45 minutes, and they have a very good sense on where they're going and what are they getting out the interventions they're implementing locally. And some of these 100 projects that were funded by the Gulbenkian Foundation are already being scaled up nationally, and some of them either internationally. And as I said, the assessment tool is now available. And this study is contributing to a national policy that started in 2016 of increasing school and curriculum autonomy, granting schools the autonomy to manage freely at least minimum 25% of teaching time. The school has total autonomy to include the contents or the skills that they want and they feel are necessary. So this started in 2016, and as a result of that, a lot of schools in the country were thinking, oh, we have to take a particular attention to the social emotional learning, to well-being, but we don't really know what are the strategies that work the best and how can we assess this. And this study, this OECD study, helped us answering these two questions. One, it produced a tool. Secondly, is helping to validate or not validate a lot of experiences in a lot of schools. So we are bringing more knowledge, more evidence to this field of this emerging field in education. And what are the implications? This was the first question that Jennifer asked us, and Dominic. What are the implications for migrants and newly arrived students? Well, we have another study by the OECD in Portugal that just finished, is about to be published, that discovered that foreigner students in Portugal, they have a lower quality of life compared with Portuguese students. They have worse relations with peers and teachers, and they face more difficulties at school. And the question is, what can we do? So we need to move our cell interventions that not always they touch the diversity or the cultural diversity approach. It's not that common. We have a lot of them that are deriving from mental health programs, but we don't have a lot of cell interventions that are anchored on a more humanistic approach and a more cultural approach to diversity. We don't have a lot of them. So this is something that we have to work more. And also to frame diversity not only as the mere acceptance of differences, but to explicitly discuss diversity as an asset, because of the diversity in languages, literacies, and cultural traditions that we can leverage, we can use, we can gain from it at the school level and also at the society level. The second thing we need to do is to explicitly connect these cell concepts that are sometimes vague to the real lives of students. So instead of doing it in a very abstract levels, we have to link it with real life experience of the kids that we have in the class. This is very obvious for teachers, but it doesn't happen that often. Sometimes we see these SES, these interventions as standalone interventions that come to add something to the curriculum. Well, we know that doesn't work a lot, that doesn't work well. So we have to integrate it within the curriculum, within the school context, the whole school context, and taking chance of what is already happening there. And also we have to take action to include all students in the school by developing safe, caring, and supportive and cooperative learning environments. To look to learning environments, to look to the communication styles, as Mario already said, to the relations that we establish at the school level, and also at the student participation. How do we plan for it? How do we implement it? And how do we learn from that participation? And also to look to these interventions not as a type of social engineering, where we fix problems of the society by adding vitamins to a model that is not working. So we have to leave that tendency, which is a very clinical tendency, and we have to finally look at this as a coordinated, sustaining, systemic, and systematic approach at the school level, but especially at the community level. And this is it for me. I leave you with an image of one of the many palaces in Sintra and invite you to come. Thank you very much.
Pedro, that was brilliant. Thank you. There's a few questions about the assessment tool that you mentioned. Is this something which is available on the Gulbenkian site, or is it through the OECD site?
Yeah, either the municipality of Sintra or the Gulbenkian, we are giving permission to the use of this tool. All that schools need or organizations is to ask, and then we send them the tools.
Great. I think the point that you started with about the kind of decline in self-reported social and emotional skills from 10 to 15-year-olds is something that all of the cities that participated in the study found to be the case as well, isn't it? And I wondered if Sintra is engaging internationally with the other cities in the study, because you've all gone through this, you've all discovered this common experience.
Yeah, I wasn't the national representative, as Mario was in the group that developed the study, but my colleague, she was very active, mentioning a lot of different experiences. And I do believe that these kinds of assessments, when you take them with the necessary precaution, which is not comparing the performance of kids on being happy or whatever, when you take the necessary precautions, which I think it was the case in the study, they are very important opportunities for teachers, school principals, headmasters, family, parents. First of all, to I don't know the word in English, to look into with another perspective to their own local domestic problems.
Yeah.
This is very important, that to feel that you're not alone, that these signs of alert that we've seen, they're not that's specialty from Sintra kids. It's quite common, and there are factors that are affecting them in all societies, not only in Portuguese society. So yeah.
And as Marjo said, there's obviously, you know, the kind of universal experience of moving into puberty and the kind of emotional and hormonal reset that takes place then that may well have a bearing on this. But Marjo, you've raised a hand for a question.
Yeah, actually I did, because I was, thank you very much, Pedro. It was really great to listen, and of course in the report we were quite often referred that in Helsinki and Sintra. But the thought that came to my mind when you were presenting, and specifically when thinking of this decline from 10 to 15 years, I mean. So one thing that I strongly believe, and we strongly believe, that we have to rethink education, even kind of what are the practices, that it's not only something that you do on site, but we really rethink education. And even in a way that if education were to be founded today from scratch, or created from scratch, so how would it look like? And one of my kind of intuitive answer to this result is that we are very capable in our traditional school system to kind of decline all this kind of creativity and creative ideas, and also in the worst case and place, so the students are not really there. They don't feel that their real life is related to what happens at schools. And the older you get, the more you want to have the agency, and the more you also want to have the real experience that whatever I do at school, it matters. It's related to my life. I can utilize these things. It makes sense to me. And if we just keep on doing business as usual, what was done decades ago, and when I and my parents and my grandparents were at school, so we are really losing our young ones if the school and education does not make sense. So probably it's also have an impact to this all other results. So I think we should take this very seriously, that we are looking into our schools, we are turning our face there and ask ourselves a very serious question: does our school make sense to our children? Do they feel that they can grow, they can bloom, they can be fostered there, and not just to learn to know or guess the right answer?
I think, and the timing of the release of the report is fantastic, because it is feeding into this climate of, you know, rethinking the very purpose of school and education, which is going on in many, many countries. I see that Jennifer Adams is unmuted, which only means one thing, sadly.
This has been such an amazing conversation, and Pedro and Marjo and Dominic, on behalf of the participants, tons of good questions and comments in the chat, and it's frustrating not to be able to continue on with the conversation. The good news is that we are going to continue on taking a closer look at the OECD study in the future. So thanks to all three of you. Yeah, just a quick comment for those of you who have experienced Knowledge Hook signature leadership, just so that you know, we also have a series for math leaders. And we have global speakers on the topic of math, those people that are in your districts or in your jurisdictions that are leading professional learning for mathematics. We've got a great series here. Again, all of the resources are free, and you're welcome to access those or share them with your math leaders. Secondly, we're also doing podcasts, and I thought that this one might be an interesting one for those of you that are very interested in kind of what's happening globally. And Juan Manuel is someone from Colombia who came from the very violent streets of Medellin in the 1990s. And his podcast, he talks about how a math teacher actually influenced him moving from that environment to becoming a very successful entrepreneur. And I thought, it's just, let me tell you, when we talked to him, it was this is one that's an inspirational story. And if teachers that you're working with, they need to pick me up right now, this is a great one. So feel free to take a listen to that. I'm going to ask Ryan to put the link for that podcast in. I just saw a question there. Finally, the next roundtable that we'll be having is on February the 23rd. And we're going to take a look at the topic of equity. And we're going to take a look at the speakers that we've had over the last year that have been talking about equity. And Pedro Nogueira, who many of you will know, is going to co-host with me. And we're going to listen to little clips from what some of the different experts have said, and then kind of think about, well, what does all this mean together? So it's a little bit of a different look at a round table, and we really hope that you'll be joining us. So again, thank you, Marjo, Pedro, Dominic. This is such important work, and hearing how things are playing out in your countries is very helpful to all of us. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and we will see you in a couple of weeks.